Okay. Um, it is 10:45. Um, so we have some folks here waiting. I think I'll go ahead and start us off with our bios. I did move from my office to a new office, and I grabbed the bios, and I forgot to bring with me the rest of the blurb with your panel title on it. I am so terribly sorry. Would one of you kindly? Oh wait, hang on. We have it. We have it here. Fantastic. Okay, thank you. For those of you who are just joining, we had a minor computer malfunction on my end. My name is Robin Moser, and I am hosting this panel from the Humanities Building at the University of Louisville. And thank you so much for joining us today. So this panel is Works in Progress, Archives, Documents, Memories. And we have three wonderful panelists for you guys today. So the way this is probably going to work is everyone will get 20 minutes. I'll make sure that I time you, which is why I'm going to have my phone out, and I'll make sure I set a timer. At the 2-minute mark, I will find the raise hand function on this particular computer, and I might ask for some assistance on finding it. I'll use the raise hand function to let you guys know when you're at 2 minutes, and then when you're at 0 minutes. And obviously, if things wrap up sooner than that, that's totally fine. We can move to the next person. And after that, then we will take questions. There should be plenty of time for questions left at the end of the panel, so long as they're questions and not those, academic ones where you're actually answering your own question in your comment. Yeah. But I know we can stick to questions and it'll be great. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists in the order that I have them on my page with their bios. So Erin Murphy, who you can see on your screen, is the author or editor of more than a dozen books, including Human Resources by Grayson Books, out in 2025, and several collections of demi-sonnets, a 7-line form that she invented. Mother as Conjunction, a collection of lyric essays, is forthcoming from Harbor Editions. Her work has appeared in Ecotone, Women's Studies Quarterly, The Best of Brevity, Best Microfiction 2024, and in anthologies from Random House, Bloomsbury, Bedford St. Martin's, and other presses. Her awards include a Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Prize, 2 Forward Indies Book of the Year Awards, forgive me, the Patterson Prize for Literary Excellence, and a Best of the Net Award. She serves as poetry editor of the Somerset Review and professor of English at Penn State University, Altoona College. So, welcome, Erin.
Thank you.
Um,
Were you going to say anything else?
I was going to say I can either introduce you all one at a time in order of how you want to present, or I can do all the introductions at the start. Up to you.
Whatever you guys wanted.
How about I introduce all of you at the start real quick, and then that way I'll just get out of the way and I'll just be timekeeper. All right. Claire, I may need your help making sure I pronounce your last name correctly. Claire Daw.
Dauge-Roth.
I did need help. Dauge-Roth. Claire Dauge-Roth, thank you, is a poet and textile artist based in Brooklyn, New York. Her work circles the textures of memory sound, materialities of translation, and what it means to know. She is also a PhD student of comparative literature at the CUNY Graduate Center, where she works on abstract languages and poetic form. As a 2025 Lost and Found Archival Fellow, she is currently conducting archival research on Annie Alber's textiles as kinetic poetics. And then we have our final panelist, Jared White, was raised in a valley of apple orchards along the Columbia River of Washington State. He holds an MFA from the University of South Florida in creative writing and a PhD from Georgia State University in poetry. He currently lives in Georgia, where he teaches a variety of English courses at Georgia Gwinnett College. His poems are often informed by childhood memories, family stories about people he's never met, and the landscapes in which he has lived. So those are our panelists for today. Again, I am very excited for this panel. Panel, any questions or concerns before we get started? Okay, great. I'm going to mute myself, and I'm probably going to take myself off screen, and I will just leave you guys to present. I have my stopwatch, my trusty stopwatch going so that we can make sure we keep track of when things are wrapping up. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and nice to meet you, Claire and Jared. Looking forward to hearing you speak. I'm impressed by how you all are handling technical challenges. So thanks for all of your work behind the scenes to make this conference happen. I first attended the Louisville conference in person 21 years ago. I realized today it was February of 2005. My then elementary age son was with me, and my son is a grown-up English professor himself. So time flies when you're in academia. Can I ask you guys a favor? Can you put something in chat for me that will help me with my presentation? Can you put in the chat what your first job was? Whatever your first job was. And Robin, you can too, even though it's showing you as the conference. It'll be the conference's first job. I'm also going to put something in chat, which is a link that'll come up in a minute. All right. So studies show that the average person spends 90,000 hours working over a lifetime, about a third of our lives working. And I was thinking about that in the context of we also spend about a third of our lives sleeping. So that really doesn't leave a lot of time for anything else. So I'm really fascinated by the work that we choose to do, the work sometimes that chooses us. And two of my recent book projects deal with labor and employment. One is, Robin mentioned, my recent book of poems, Human Resources, that came out in June 2025. And also an anthology that I edited, and I put the link there in the chat. It's called The Book of Jobs, Poems About Work. And it came out as a special issue of the journal One Art in September. It actually came out on Labor Day, appropriately enough. And then an open access monograph is coming out from state university libraries this spring. We're actually doing the kind of final editing of that right now. And so that's free open access, and that'll be the fancy schmancy, like fully accessible version, like, voice and everything. So I need to check that out when it comes out soon. And so I'm going to talk about two projects. I'm also permitting going to give you a little prompt in case you want a poem of your own. And then I just also want to mention, because my panelists here also do work with documents, I have an anthology of documentary poetry coming out from Wesleyan University Press, come out in early spring 2027. So about a year from now, I'm editing that with Koya Fagan Maples, University of Alabama. So Human Resources, it's a collection of documentary about labor and employment to give a face to those who've been marginalized by impersonal, even brutal working conditions. The subjects range from migrant farmers in the Southwest US to cell phone manufacturers in China. Their persona, erasure, research-based and memoir poems that hopefully help to illuminate the human beings behind profits and policies. So I'm going to read three of the poems from Human Resources to start. The first is a persona poem, which is a poem that very obviously not from the point of view of the poet, also is dramatic monologue. And I want to thank Patricia Smith, poet, for publishing this originally in Women's Studies Quarterly. A little bit of background information on this poem. On April 24th, 2012, a building housing 5 factories in Savar, Bangladesh collapsed, killing nearly one-third of the 3,600 textile workers. The building was called Rana Plaza. Rana Plaza. My father was in hospital that day. His pulse as low as the bank sheet during dry season. I wanted to stay with him, but we were warned no time for illness, not even your own. Had he died, which, Alhamdulillah, he did not, bosses would have said nothing to be done. If he's dead, he's dead. And so I left my father's side. It was 8:10 a.m. when I arrived. Workers gathered by the gate, afraid. Reshma squeezed my arm. In my mind, there is a photograph of her wearing a purple and red salwar kameez. Inspectors were. She breathed to my ear. They say it is unsafe. We had all seen the cracks. Up close, the building sounded like someone chewing uncooked place. And who was surprised? Each day crews added more floors. It seemed a tower of blocks waited to topple. I'm not the type to complain. I am grateful for work. One who can read or write cannot expect the privileges of the rich. I sew until midnight most shifts. I sew to feed my boys and send them to school. Hope they learn what they need to make a better life. Reshma and I hesitated. The bosses said, "Don't worry, Mahila, it's fine," and herded us through the door like goats. "Come, come," they said. "We have orders to fill." I turned on my machine, a workhorse, 100 stitches per second, so smooth it's like sewing through ghee. Could afford one of my own. I've taken jobs for home. It worked with all of us in one room. Could roll the boys' beds during the day. That morning, as I sat down on my stool, I felt a shudder. Then, in a flash, the walls were gone and the floor fell away from my feet. I was buried to my hips in a pile of concrete. It took 9 hours for help to come and many more to pull us free. But no Reshma, whose name means like silk. I found her 2.5 weeks later. She had survived. Rainwater and biscuits scavenged from the rucksack of the dead. Even now she carries dust in her mouth. Others were not as lucky. Grandmothers, women, young children, girls not old enough to marry. Sweet Mita, who always bit her bottom lip as she fed rivers of fat across the plate. So many lost their lives that day. But if we had refused to go upstairs, we would have lost our jobs. We obeyed. Throughout human resources, we have erasure poems that are they're erasures of HR manuals. And so I'll share a few of those. So an erasure is when you have an existing text and you erase certain words and create a poem out of the remaining words that you've selected, creating new meaning out of that. A lot of times it's a commentary on the original text. So I read hundreds, probably thousands of pages of HR manuals for this project. It was a bit soul-crushing. One is called HR Erasure, Policy on Management Responsibilities. Violate your country and principles every day. Learn that no one expects you to be good. Business must always come first. Avoid the appearance of ethics. Make sure everyone gets hurt. And this one is HR Erasure, Policy on Clarity. Use euphemisms. Be ambiguous. Choose your own definitions for words, your own geography of jargon. Right size your reality. Company adjusts. The company seeks feedback. The company empowers. All days are not days. All hours are not hours. All hours are not hours. One of the coolest things I've ever experienced is in October, Jonathan Harrow wrote a script based on a human resource on my poems, and that was performed at Penn State. And we had students, faculty, staff, and community members all perform different roles of the stage production, and it was really powerful, really meaningful to me to witness that. And now Jonathan is in the process of publishing that script that other universities, colleges, community theater can use the script well. I want to transition to talking the book of jobs about work, which again is linked in the chat there. I'll do it again in case anybody has joined since I listed it. So this was a project. I solicited submissions from all over the world. I ended up receiving 3,000 submissions for this project, and I selected 135 poems. And it was important to me to include all different types of work, all different kinds of labor, including domestic work, parenting, caregiving. I wanted to make sure all different types of work were reflected in the book. And I also wanted blurbs not just from writers, but from regular workers. So if you go to the link and scroll down, you can see the different blurbs. There's a blurb from a bartender, a postal worker, attendant, in addition to blurbs by writers. So I want to spend some time honoring the poets who are in this collection for this part of my presentation. So this is from the introduction. In these pages, you will find poems about a wide range of jobs, from coal miners to caregivers, farmers to flight attendants, and organizers to Uber drivers, engineers to exterminators, teachers to tech workers, artists to athletes, doctors to dunking booth clowns. Really is a poem about a dunking booth clown in there. You'll also find the work of non-human beetles, meerkats, birds, earthworms, donkeys, whales, dolphins, and dogs, along with the natural world itself, in which, quote, a little earth pushes up, a little plant life also. Oh. You'll read about unemployment, discrimination, incarceration, unsafe working conditions, chattel slavery, also discover humor, tenderness, joy, pride, and appreciation for those who show up again, 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 end quote. The first poem I want to share from the Book of Jobs is by Gloria Ogo. She's an American-based Nigerian writer who writes, and this is Letters for the ones whose names rarely cross payroll, and for my mother who cleaned hotel rooms 6 door keys deep, folding towel swans no guest remembered, and my father, night shift at the bottling plant, palms glowing faint with phosphor when he kept us awake. For Mrs. Salcedo in the cafeteria, silver hairnet, hushed, voiced Spanish lullabies to the beans, who wrote tomorrow's menu on steam. For Ernest, custodian, who replaced the flag rope at dawn, said nothing of his stitched shoulder, whistled dizzy Gillespie to the mop bucket feet, and left chalk drawings on night-polished floors only the morning visitor ever saw. Ode Grandpa's index finger, black grease half moon that traced carburetors, taught me how engines remember heat. To Auntie Des, undocumented angel of room 3 through 12B, finding patience, lifting words nurses dropped, whispering psalms to a monitor's blue pulse. Praise the warehouse temp who scribbled the weight of each box in a pocket Bible, believe numbers are prayers when we're repeated enough. And the seamstress at the end of line 4, humming all through denim 12 hours straight, leaving secret cross stitches under belt loops, her way of seeing the unseen. I tally them tonight, all these unpaid gestures, time blinks no scanner caught, steam rising from a plastic dinner, the why are you still awake kiss, light left on in an empty hall. Let this ledger be overtime, back pay issued in breath and ink. Let it accrue interest in whatever letter heaven keeps for hands that never stop moving while no one is looking. The next poem I want to share with you from Jobs is by Rachel Malalou, who is an emergency room physician and a mother of 5. The poem is called Good Friday 2020. And of course, we all know what was happening spring of 2020. It was the peak COVID-19 pandemic. You can imagine what her life was like as an ER doctor. Good Friday 2020. At night, I no longer kiss my children. I fear the errant wind of my bedtime prayer carries dissolution. I am dust. My particulates hang deadly in the room. I didn't give up anything for Lent, and then I gave up everything. No ashes on my forehead, but rather on my tongue, my mouth parched behind the mask. If this day is still good, the seal will hold. I am faceless, I stop smiling at patients, but I'm close enough when I place the blade in their mouths and search for the pale glisten of words when I pass the breathing tube. Last week, there was still time, so I let him call his son. He wept and said, I love you, then swore it wouldn't be long before they spoke again. I never make promises I can't keep. It's simple to say, he will die, and miraculously he does not. No one ever grudges resurrection. The next poem is very short. It's a poem by E.M. Litha Soria, who works as a farmer and a three-wheeler driver in Sri Lanka. May 21st. Today's first ride was to the courts. A husband's taken a loan, fled abroad, and the wife's been served papers. She went with me there. I had to give my ID and pay her bail money too. Such are our priceless services. I only charged her the money for the ride. Some of my favorite poems in the Book of Jobs are surreal, like this one. It's by Benjamin Nesbitt, who's a Chicago-based writer. It's called Simply Following Instructions. Simply following corporate instructions, I dump stuff into the machine. We need more stuff, my boss yells, dumped into the machine. He looks at me, and when I do not respond quickly enough, he throws me into the machine. I am honored, really, but I barely move the needle. Machine needs more. I think a lot of us can relate to that in academia. Academic machine needs more. Here's a caregiving poem by Andre Lamont Wilson, who works with adults with disabilities in California. It's called Body. Your body, memory of its weight when I carried you from your wheelchair to the toilet and back, fingers in my arms long after your death. This next one is by Francine Rubin, a stay-at-home mom to three young children. She probably works more than all of us combined. Labor. I made another person in my body. I pushed until I shat and wasn't sure I would make it out alive. One doctor told me my baby's heart rate was dropping, so I needed to roll myself and my contracting belly baby to a better position. None of this is a metaphor. And last, I'm going to share also a short poem. It's by Dolo Diaz, who lives in California and just published her first chapbook of poems. It's called Wood Harvesting. Wood Harvesting. He worked for my father, tumbled on the mountain cliff in the shovel logger. He was an only child. My father had to tell his father. So the prompt that I'm going to throw out there, in case you're interested, if you want to take some note here, is to think about wood harvesting, the poem that I just read, the short poem by Dolo Diaz, and Good Friday, 2020 by Rachel Lulu. Both of them tell tragic stories in a very matter-of-fact tone, right? They don't exactly tell us how we felt or how we're supposed to feel as the reader. And so I'd like for you to think about, brainstorm any dramatic work stories that might have happened to you or someone you know, maybe a family member, maybe a close friend, dramatic work stories that you can think of. It could even be just something that you read in the news or something that happened in your community. And I want you to write a poem in 5 lines with a matter-of-fact tone. I'm going to reread Wood Harvesting for you so you can get a sense of that matter-of-fact tone. And I'm also going to read you a sample poem that somebody, a local person, did in a workshop for me in Altoona. Wood Harvesting, Dolo Diaz. He worked for my father, tumbled down the mountain cliff in the shovel logger. He was an only child. my father had to tell his father. And this is an example of a poem somebody did in a workshop with me. Her name is Sherry Dilling, and she works at a local shoe factory in Altoona. Her poem is Dad. You couldn't get comfortable in the hospital bed. There was no relief in the reclining chair. I kept asking the nurse, but there wasn't much we could do. I wrote your back. So 5 lines with a matter-of-fact tone. And I know my 2 minutes warning was just up, so we probably have 90 seconds now. If you want to take a minute to write that, and then you can either pop your lines in the chat, or if you want to email them to me, I'll put my email in the chat as well. But I'm eager to see what you come up with. Time us for about 45 seconds. Okay, so thank you so much for listening. If there's time during the Q&A, somebody might want to share what they created.
Thank you so much, Erin. I'm just going to pop in real quick. I imagine that we are moving to Claire next. Am I correct in that? Just to make sure that I didn't talk this one through, I'll leave my hand up for the 2 minute warning until I get like eye contact, just to make sure you acknowledge it so you can see it, because that one didn't quite work, but that's okay. So just letting you know, I'll just leave it up until I get a thumbs up for an acknowledgement, and then I'll put it down so I know that you've got it. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Erin, so much.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna share my screen actually because I have some slides. Here we go. All right, can you all see that? Yes, wonderful. Okay, so I'm working on this paper right now on Annie Albers. So I thought I would move through it and then, yeah, I'd be here happy to talk about it in the Q&A too. All right, so we're gonna start here. So in Epitaph, her last woven piece, Annie Albers weaves a language unraveling, a system of signing and signaling that she has come to rest in the fray. Against a weft of shimmering gold lurex, she embeds the warp with threads of black and white cotton, which seem to melt down the woven page. The black horizontal lines bookending the piece recall the textured lingual system of her earlier pictorial weavings, such as haiku in 1961 or code in 62. But now, read top to bottom, these lineated black threads open and melt to burrow diagonally down the warp. They catch themselves again at the bottom, in a pool of lineation transformed by its own undoing. In Epitaph, Albers breaks from her practice of knots, a form of textural punctuation that evokes starts and stops within the line of woven utterance. She prompts us with what we might think we know of her tactile language, and at the instant of apprehension, sets the material free again. Much has been made of Albers' title, Epitaph. There's its obvious commemorative ring. The title frames the piece as an inscription, as a written mark upon some kind of tombstone bearing the weight of finality. And yet the sonic origin of epitaph overlays another meaning. The Greek epitaphion evokes a funeral oration, or the ceremonial words spoken over a grave. Instead of being read, as one might with written marks, Alber's epitaph is an occasion of sound, of singing, a resonance that lingers in the air. Amongst the vibrations of black and white cotton, we can sense Alber's attunement to the voice of the threads. She listens to how the material desires to translate its song one last time. Taking up Alber's core philosophy of material and one's sensibility to it guides the argument of this paper. While Alber's attachments to the Bauhaus movement in Germany, her 1933 move to the US, and the decade plus she spent at Black Mountain College are important to understanding her, Alber's and her work have been put within this historical context elsewhere. Here, I spend time pursuing Alber's investment in the intuitive over the intellectual, to re-examine what exists under words and beyond our automatic reasoning, which is too often informed or clouded by strictures of the rational. For Albers, the thing itself is the meaning. I ask what it might look like to take this seriously, to stay here with the texture of material and to listen to it in all of its subtleties. How might the intuitive be a method of sitting with Alber's pictorial weavings? And how might this turn import a different rigor that opens other modes of feeling what threads under and beyond language itself? The first piece we'll look at is Alber's Black, White, and Gold, which initiates the lineated thread that appears across several of her specifically pictorial weavings. So these weavings that were meant to be considered as art rather than as crafty wall hangings, perhaps. While Alber's preoccupation with the textile as text was ongoing, which is demonstrated by her knowledge of pre-Columbian Peruvian weavers and earlier pieces like this one named Ancient Writing, the pictorial weaving's language emerges through this lineated thread. Often black or white cotton, this superimposed weft moves side to side across the warp and is accentuated by knots which score the surface. In black, white, gold, named after the three colors of the materials themselves, these lines transition rectilinearly. They echo the movement of a typewriter, shuttling across and down the page and moving in right angles. As such, the lines compose a kind of score my eyes can follow. I am tempted to hum the duration of the line, to cut my breath short at the knots. The piece remembers a vibration which with my eyes and mouth are familiar. A decade later comes haiku, and a year after code. Alber's compositions become narrower, less akin to musical scores, and more so reminiscent of jotted notes or thin scrolls of paper. In these pieces, the same cotton thread travels across the warp alongside the weft. Yet thread occasionally jumps to the next line at an angle, sometimes crossing into an abstracted redaction or slash. Knots punctuate the surface, but do so not only as punctuation, but as staccato markings that trail off the line to compose their own. With haiku, we could be tempted to read the haiku's bait-and-switch quality into the lineated pattern, whereas Alber's code could be read as a nod to Morse code or a transmission to be decoded. Yet, as Ty Smith notes in the conclusion of their book, Bauhaus Weaving Theory, mirroring the quality of a woven surface, a code is based as much on a principle of transparency as it is on obfuscation. Alber's pictorial weavings are internal. They are self-referential systems. Certainly, the code she develops could be read as an abstraction of familiar formations of language, or more generatively, perhaps, these pictorial weavings can be felt as a quality of language that transmits and theorizes in and of itself. So following this, there's no underlying clarity really to uncover. There's no code to crack. Unlike artists who employ the glyphic as a direct translation of worded sense, Albers is interested in staying with the material itself as a language. We are then tasked as viewers to stay here with her in the vocal event of the thread. This is the space which, to Albers, asks us to come down from the clouds to the ground of the real. For Albers, material is the most real thing there is. Yet reading material, seriously listening to threads, as Albers does, also requires us to dwell in the continuous vague of experience, as defined by William James in his essay, A Stream of Thought. We must sit with the resonant Jamesian plus ultra of the thread. There are echoes of James's plus ultra, what he considers the more beyond of our immediate experience of language, in Vincent Broca's essay on the Albers Poetics, which was featured in the couple's 2021 Paris retrospective. In this essay, Broca comments on Annie Albers' poetic interest in sensations beyond verbal writing and discourse, and suggests she was, through her practice, looking for an abstract poetry akin to a secret language. For Broca, Albers' secret language cannot be deciphered except as the very formula of weaving. So while I move alongside Broca, and I agree with a lot of what he's saying, I argue Albers' pictorial works transport her viewer not only to the core formula of weaving, but to this underlying beyond that undergirds language itself. Her work theorizes through sensation the question of tending to the inarticulable, this invisible inner sense that supersedes the finite word, and following process philosopher Alfred Whitehead, expands the act of expression into an atmospheric diffusion. Broca briefly touches on this lingual beyond in regard to Albers' typewriter studies, which is what is on the screen here. These might be interpreted as her most alphabetically legible pieces. As she borrows typed signs, her viewer can project a certain kind of familiarity onto. Yet I perceive a continued attention to the materiality of the lingual beyond through her later works, too. After she sets weaving down, her orchestra prints here, for instance, recall the quality of silence that precedes the sound of the first note, the shuffling of scores, people settling in their seats, a collective tuning and attunement. Through a layering of ink, the prints transition from etched lines to shapes with depth. We dwell in the material silence made space in these outlines of anticipation. And yet it is the promise of the marked note, of the delineated sound, which invites the texture of the sonic infinite into the piece. Just as the note differentiates itself from atmospheric sound, the quality of the note is simultaneously contoured by the sonic texture from which it emerges. The finite mark of notation, of language, of knotted weft, carries with it the inarticulable, the unmarked, this unsayable quality of the plus ultra which both drives and shapes language. Albers' insistence on the material of words themselves pushes me to consider the interlocking warp and weft as a kind of scrim through which we can sense the inarticulable quality behind language's communicative vessels. Though Albers would not call herself a concrete poet, her orchestra prints and material philosophy of language remind me of Emmett Williams' work, particularly Concrétion in Material 3, a volume that the Albers kept in their very own poetry collection. So upon encountering this text in the Annie Albers archive, the initial visual link between Williams' book cover and Albers' orchestra prints was striking. On Williams' cover, the shapes are constructed not by ink, but by cutouts, sliced gaps in the paper that give way to the first white page. The cut traces the typed word as it emerges. The shape selects what text we read while obfuscating the rest. Yet this obfuscation is not opaque. If we look closely here, the cut dips into the fray of other typed signs. From the first encounter with Williams' cover, we can sense there is language that lies beyond, but which we cannot read through intellectual methods. Sitting with the frayed edges of the type, the motivating force of James's plus ultra is felt. We are propelled to the next page. Moving through Williams' book, he continues to play with the intangible aspect of language by transforming alphabetized signs. At first, they might feel familiar, a scatter of E's, of O's. He patterns gradations of letters, overlays their curvatures into thick lines resembling Albers' weft. He rotates the symbol into defamiliarization and breaks the aspect of a singular page through cutouts which emphasize the hidden depth inherent to the concept of surface. Abstracted letters and signs in Williams reveal shades of material physicality. Making alphabetized language material opens an intuition toward the haptic residue that remains outside yet shapes the translational process inherent to articulation. If we are to read Williams' work out loud, we find ourselves within a field of resonance. The voice of the page provokes an abstract lingual quality. This requires the voicer and receptor to shift their sensorial attunements so they might feel the haptic subtlety that threads this expression. But how might we practice listening for this plus ultra of language? Reading Albers through James, her often cited essay and concept of tactile sensibility takes on a different heft. In this essay, Albers outlines exercises meant to train not only the weaver, but which might help attune a general public to better perceive tactility by tending to materials in the rough. Matière, which in her essay refers to the weaving surface as it relates to its intertwined depth, must be approached proprioceptively. Albers urges her reader to develop various sensual tensions, since it is through mosaicked receptivity that they might move past adjectival readings of surface or color and into matière subtle qualities such as graininess, glossiness, smoothness. Attending to subtleties, we listen to the interplaying harmonies of material. We might intuit the hidden construction behind the surface, the tucked threads, the underlying warp, the inlaid cords that hold and sound the woven piece together. Through this increased sensitization to depth, Albers argues we might grow new terms in the vocabulary of tactile language. This language of tactility might not be translatable into worded sense. This is where James's plus ultra also allows us to consider shades of lingual simultaneity, which in the process of articulation remain outside of linear worded sense. When we speak, we most likely do so one word after another, yet the construction of thought of the prelingual exists outside of this linear time. James represents this process as the chord of ABC, three thoughts which, while distinct in some respects, overlap and resound together. Thought A, for instance, even when uttered, cannot be heard without shades of B and C. Hans-Georg Mayer's type poems, which are from 1965 and another prized volume from the Albers Library, might offer us a visual of this simultaneous languaging. So here, letters are printed and layered over one another in regular lines and rows, and they ask us how to utter the sound of all these letters at once to craft the sound of the illegible yet glimpsed. Mayer's letters are turned into material through abstraction, and we are asked to read into simultaneity. So moving back to Albers' haiku, and I was looking at these together when I was in the archive, Mayer's alphabetical knots help us perceive the untranslatable quality of the vague that lies within Albers' thread, while supporting her insistence on the language of material. If, as Albers claims, material is a form of communication, one that we can attend to only through flickers of intuition, then her work asks how we might hear the feeling of it, how we might expand our tactile sensibility past the primary connotation of touch to encompass other modes of sensing or hearing. And how does the plus ultra help us reconceptualize the sonic and material poetics of thread? An avid reader of James, process philosopher Alfred Whitehead transposes some of his concepts through his own work, particularly in his treatises on perception and understanding. Albers, a reader of Whitehead, thus enters this lineage. And so what you see on the screen now is one of the letters in which she mentions Whitehead's work. And she comes back to him more than she does really anyone else, or any other philosopher, at least. So this is a letter to her husband. We're in 1955 here, and she's reading Whitehead's dialogues. This is the same decade in which she'll make 24 of her 36 pictorial weavings, and which falls somewhere between Black, White, Gold, which we saw at the beginning, and later works such as Haiku and Code, which are in the early 60s. So I don't bring this up as a historicist intervention to deciphering Albers' process. She remains rather oblique on that front, and I'd like to respect that in a way. But rather I bring this up to feel out the subtle field of communication that I sense between Whitehead, James, and Albers. For instance, Whitehead also shares Albers' appreciation for tactility, for grasping the topic in the rough, instead of through intellectualized or smoothed preconceptions. For him, echoing James, the activity of perception is also fragmentary and leaves something beyond our area of comprehension. This something beyond this plus ultra of language animates the communicating material in Albers' language pictorial weavings. It is Albers' dear friend, John Cage, who describes the accidental encounter with which one's means of communication is something that speaks to us, a texture or a sound. Through a continued dialectical residence, we find our language. It is the subtlety of attunement which leads to inventive, expressive action, subtlety implying a refinement of attention, which is rooted in the Indo-European tila, implying web, net, or warp of fabric. Albers' weavings then evoke this subtle refinement, this attentive net through which the atmosphere is sifted into perception. The net resonates a tonality, a sonic echo of James's vague. This is what speaks, what Albers insists we listen to. It is only by not listening to material that one ends in failure. The development of personal subtlety is thus animated and charged. One may turn to John Cage's attunements to such subtlety in pieces like 433. In pieces like that, the full chord of silence resounds its multiplicity, which throughout the durational performance expands the fray of listening to encompass a broader yet more refined haptics of sensual perception. Suddenly, we hear what we could not before. With pieces like 433, we are listening to the material texture of the air. To Albers, this material listening is more than an external active process that we engage in. The subtlety of material listening is truly what makes us active. In working with material, be it air, words, or thread, the work of the vague is to listen for the dictation and to follow the fringe of material voices, whatever form they may be. This material dialogic recalls Roland Barthes' grain of the voice that speaks that specific friction that distinguishes one voice from another. The grain for Barthes evokes the spectral physicality of the voicer. It carries the feeling of the other's body into the sonic encounter. I see you. And the quality that cannot be translated by the language adjective. Instead, we are meant to alter the very level of perception or intellection in material encounters through one ears one can touch. Or at the very least, we can perceive the act of touching. A dialogue is established between sound and listener. The grain for Barthes is the abstract sensation that carries within it the significance of the voice, which he defines as the friction of sonic materiality brushing up against something else. What is this something else? Right? We might consider this another manifestation of James's plus ultra. And in an active struggle with the inarticulable nature of his perceptions, Barthes asks his reader, am I alone in perceiving it? Am I hearing voices within the voice? Yet he concludes by situating voice as an experience of multiplicity. Isn't the truth of the voice to be hallucinated, he asks? Isn't the entire space of the voice an infinite one? To seriously attune to the voice of material is a hallucinatory promise. But taking Albers' threaded voices seriously, Barthes' grain can help us conceive of Albers' threads as agential tangles, whose particular matter is informed by relations bearing significance. The threads hold a past, a memory, bear traces of space and time within their compositional grain. It is the thread's situatedness within a network of relations that informs the grain of their voice, the grain Albers so deftly attunes herself to and becomes, through subtle listening, in relation to. Returning to Albers' epitaph, right here, the weaving imposes something new on our quality of attention and theorizes alongside Whitehead the quality of understanding as never a static state of mind. Compared to Albers' previous works, not only is there renewed movement in epitaph, but the piece asks us to reconceptualize her previously languid pictorial weavings in order to sense the newfound freedom of the thread. The piece swerves into the sensation of plus ultra as the curves of superimposed black and white weft gesture beyond the gridded stricture of the loom. Unraveling themselves from previous systems of rectilinear language, the threads in epitaph melt, overlap, and resound. What we hear through our senses is the echo of the non-articulable, the grainy presence of the intangible within the voice of the thread. Albers' poetics are tactically relational. Her philosophy of language and attention to the quality of the inexpressible reconsiders language itself as a system of signs that, in their signing, simultaneously delimit and gesture toward their shaded qualities which remain intangible. Her work pushes us to tend intuitively to gaps, to white space, to silence. She gives agency to the very material of words themselves as signals of what lives beyond. All right, and I'll end there. Thank you.
Yeah. We're all clapping. We're all clapping. I guess it's my turn. I don't know if Robin's coming back on right now. Hi, thank you. Um, well, Erin and Claire, you guys are fantastic. Very different from each other. Um, I kind of feel like you guys are champagne and I'm dishwater. You guys are so good. I'm excited to talk about your work. So I have never done a virtual poetry reading. And so I was thinking to share 5 poems, and they're not very long. Um, I have a grouping of poems that I've written about time on a farm, my grandparents' farm growing up, and just some of the stories I remember from that period of my life. If I am interested um, about this idea of how our about landscape and how landscapes inform our experience and our art. And I'm interested in especially the landscapes during our childhoods can affect us throughout our entire lives. So I would invite anybody interested to share in the chat, since Erin was a great example about doing this. I think it's a fun idea. Um, could you, anyone who wants to, can you just say where you where you spent your childhood? If it's one place or maybe multiple places, and also maybe a detail from that landscape. I'd be really interested in that. Even though I live in Georgia, I grew up in Washington State. Um, and it still shapes what I write today, and I haven't lived there for like 30 years. So I wonder if it would be okay if I shared my screen so that you can just, in case I have audio issues, you can still see the words of my poems. And also, in case some of you are just more visual, I'm going to try this. Okay. Can you guys see some photos? All right. So this is my collection, or this for this grouping, and I'm still working on some other pieces for it, is called Canals. In Washington State, as in other places, there are sometimes very large canals and like wider than roads. Just they're huge, and they go through the area, and from them there will be these smaller arterial canals, and the farmers use siphons to get water from the smaller canals into the individual um, ditches of sorts. And so if you stand on the side of the field looking down the rows, you'll see this something like this third picture where the water eventually works its way to the end of the field. So this is how they irrigate in dry places. And so um, my work involves details from these types of things. Okay. My first poem is called Communion. Where 100 rusted siphons arch over the ditch bank to tether rows of wheat to the flow. My cousins trap tadpoles. They kneel, and each lifts one to his mouth, shows out empty hands, then bluffs a swallow. They set one to wriggle on my palm, say to eat it if I aim to take up with them. I say that's a load of bull. So they ride off on their bikes. I don't know where to. And besides, I have no bike. When they are gone, I strip off my clothes and limp the gravel path to the canal. Its water is cold as memory. I float facing the sky, my ears drowned, and pull myself along by the bank's grass. I close my eyes, act like a dead man floating. I want those jerks to spot me and holler out. I picture my funeral. My cousins are bawling in the front pew. I'm in the pretty box beside the pulpit, and all the food has paprika. The sun is high now. Poplars tilt in the wind. Water skippers dart from me. They walk the water like Jesus. I rip some tall horsetail and race them in the flow. I ride from my uncle's place to Martha's. Martha's my grandma, by the way. From my uncle's place to Martha's. The pollywogs loaf in the shadows. I catch them in my hands, drop them in a mason jar I stole from the kitchen. Some have legs, and some don't. I try feeding them to the cats. If Pearl, my white Tom, will eat it, so will I. Pearl eats it. He gives me nerve. I put one in my mouth and it squirms like it knows the way out. Then it tucks in my bottom lip like chew. Its skin tastes like molded bread. I nudge it out with my tongue. My back teeth work it like a grape tomato till its rubbery body breaks open in me. I taste the weak wine of its insides. I shudder it down. I take off hollering down the lane. Pearl skitters after me. Okay, this second poem is about a dog named Tinkerbell. It's a little border collie that we had on the farm. And I love that dog. The sun has hung low over the fields all day. Martha takes me to the canal behind the house to pick strawberries. We hear sharp yelps, see the de Beaumont's two Rottweilers flee into the cornfield. Tink, our collie, is lying beside the wheelbarrow. Her eyes blink wildly. The dirt around her is soused with blood. Her throat is open as a faucet. Martha kneels and buries her face into Tink's side. I kneel but don't touch. Martha says, "Sweet heavenly mercy." Martha hurries across the lawn to get Grandpa. Now he is running toward Tink and me. He kneels. He says, "Damn it." He leaves, is back with the old shovel and his rifle, and at once something is breaking in me. "Go inside," he says. "I'm staying," I say. "She's my dog too." Grandpa touches Tink's head. "That's a good girl," he says. The blood in the soil gleams. He stands, steps back. He shoots. And Tink's head winces an imprint into the ground. It seems her eyes are still watching me. He drops the gun in the strawberry patch, walks to his pickup, drives off. I pick up the shovel and dig. Um, this this next poem is about well, I guess the title, the a pivot is a really large sprinkler that can be like the length of a football field, and each segment of it is on wheels, and part of it is connected to a pipe in the ground from underground water, and then it kind of pivots around the whole field in a circle. It's a way to irrigate a really large field with if you have water from the ground instead of one of the canals. Setting the pivots. I chase a dozen cats with a willow switch. The passing combine scatters the litter through the yard. I chase them into the de Beaumont's wheat field. I can't think to kill their dogs for Tink, but she's on my mind. I go a couple rows in. I've seen Grandpa Wally, they call him Wallbanger, kill snakes by torching whole stubble fields. I fish my pocket for the matchbook I snuck out the tool shed. I light one and aim it at a head of wheat. A spark jumps, spooks me like a ghost. I run across the yard, wash for lunch, sit at Martha's table. The Rottweilers, a short piece away, are in hysterics. I don't give a damn. I had kissed Tink on the mouth. Wallbanger had said she's mine, said a boy needs a dog. Wallbanger comes into the kitchen, says, "Sounds like they found a squirrel." Martha dashes paprika over all we eat like it's superstition. She sets me to shuck on the porch in the noon shade. I sit on my bucket and split the fray, peel back the husks to the shank. I bust them clean off the cob, pull white silk from the rose, and bat swarms of crawling flies. I sneak a bite of seed out the cob. It's raw and all sweetness. My tongue swims the juice. I hear sirens, and Martha asks Wallbanger, "What's all the smoke?" And boy, he comes alive, and never hauled so like a spooked mule deer. He flies across the kitchen and busts the screen door clean off. We see the de Beaumont setting the water pivots wide open, and hired men running with buckets and spades, wall bangers hollering like a ruined man. The fire is touching down on our wheat now. Martha says, those de Beaumont boys are devils, they are, sneaking around setting fire to our fields without regard, and now they set their own on fire, and our own. And the whole time I keep gnawing the cob without regard, she says again, and I say nothing, like my tongue's been cut out, like I can't set open the pivots in my heart for words to rush out. I see the black clouds of wheat rising to heaven, the smoke darkening my appearance, until even the cob's sweetness to my tongue is dust. So I think I have two more poems. Um, this this one is called The Sheep. And these poems are meant to be in this order where um, tensions between our family and the de Beaumonts are escalating. The de Beaumont boys are just older than me. They sneak into our sheep pen. We hear crazed laughter and see out the window a burning bush in the night, tumbling wildly. I imagine how they cornered it, pinned it, a knee to its throat, doused it with diesel and lit it, laughing to see it seize and squeal. We arrive to see the carcass charred and bloody. It's still now and smoking in the cold air. The police say they left no trace, but we know. The police say, really now, them de Beaumont boys is nice boys. Grandpa says they do as what pleases them. Grandma Martha stands over the lamb, holding her face together. And this is the last one I have in the grouping. Um, it's called Psalm. On Friday night, Mr. and Mrs. de Beaumont are at a picture show. Martha sends me down the lane for the mail. I see them across the road sneaking into Randy Stanley's corral to ride his Clydesdale. Randy is old and shy and turns in early. They bring ropes, no saddle. I duck behind the lilac tree at the mailbox. The older boy runs at the mare and swings his leg over her rump. It bolts and he drops to the manure. His leg tangles in the ropes. The horse bolts clean through the slatted wooden fence, down the gravel lane. His brother runs home. She takes the boy across the ground. She takes him with her into the dark. I run, tell Martha. She sends Wallbanger to have a look. He's back with blankets in his arms. He found the boy at the edge of our wheat field. He opens the bundle, and I see what should be a face. He looks like roadkill. Wallbanger says the mare is beyond the cement ditch, crying and holding as still as death. Wallbanger lays the boy on the table. On the table we only eat Sunday dinner on. Tells Martha to do her best on the boy. Wallbanger calls for an ambulance. It's miles out. He calls the de Beaumonts. They're at the picture show. He calls Randy Stanley to come shoot his own horse. Randy says he'll shoot the boy too. I hear Martha sing, "The Lord is my shepherd, no want shall I know. I feed in green pastures. Safe folded, I rest. Martha dips a soft cloth in the basin of warm water. She dabs it pink and trades it for another. She sings, in the midst of affliction, my table is spread. With blessings unmeasured, my cup runneth over. I close my eyes and picture Randy weeping over his horse. I feel the hate in me trying to break open. When I open my eyes, Martha is swiping aside the boy's hair. She whispers sweetly to his ear, kisses his forehead. Thank you. I need to stop sharing, I think. Or does someone just take this from me? I can't be trusted.
I can try. Jared, that was wonderful. You had time left.
Thank you.
I wasn't trying to end. I just, when you mentioned you were,
No, I had those five, and then I
yeah,
had four more that have nothing to do with those five,
great.
and they're
Wonderful.
completely different in every way. So that
Okay.
might be a good spot to stop. That'd be okay.
If you're sure, I wasn't trying to cut your time off.
No, no, you didn't. No, thank
I
you.
am not certain how to get it to stop sharing on my end. I do apologize for that.
Oh, let me see.
Um,
Okay.
there we go. Great. You did it. Okay. Well, I we'll open the floor. Again, if you guys have any questions for our panelists, if you want to ask questions of one another, the floor is open. If you're one of our participants here, I'm just looking if you could raise your hand. And if you don't know how to raise your hand, that's okay. You can unmute either your microphone or your video and kind of wave at us, and we'll go from there.
While we're waiting for questions, I just wanted to say to Jared that I had a border collie too growing up, and then also had one as a grown up. So
Oh,
I liked hearing about Tink. I had a tramp who found us and a Lacey.
well, wonderful. I felt bad having so many bad things happen to the animals in my poetry. Sorry if it was triggering for anybody. I do love animals. I don't hurt animals. I just want to say that.
I do have a question for you. So I was curious, and thanks for sharing your screen so we could see your work, but I was curious about your decision to fuse the sentences and not use punctuation. And can you just talk about that? Talk about that decision?
Sure, it's a new thing that I'm experimenting with, I guess. And as you could probably hear, it trips me up sometimes if I don't lineate it a certain way. Um, I wanted it to feel a little more, I don't know if you know the work of Frank Stanford. Um, he was a Southern poet. I think he lived until he was about 35. He was a really interesting poet, though. And he, it almost feels more like I think it helps it sound like a younger speaker in a way, where they're not bounded by grammar or punctuation. And it also feels a little more urgent to me because there is some, I guess, some violence and um, different things like that happening in the poem, where a reader might want to know, well, what's going to happen? Is there going to be a fire in the field, or I don't know. I think it's a little different also. So I'm not exactly sure the effect it's having, but I'm interested in it for now.
Yeah, I was definitely noticing that it does kind of help to create that childlike awareness of the world, which is good. Yeah.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
I was also going to ask a similar question about that. And maybe it's also because, we don't get to see poems so often when they're read to us. Um, And I didn't know, yeah, I was wondering if it had also to do with what you were talking about with memory and sort of this like blending of events and of time as well as this younger speaker. But I don't know if that was also on your mind while you were thinking about landscape and memory, but
Yeah. Well, I guess like Claire, what you were like, what your work is also talking about, um, like our language is much different than our thought. And our thoughts, like we might have like 100, maybe 1,000 thoughts in a minute or something, maybe much more. And we don't punctuate them. It's just kind of like they just like I don't know. It's like catching water from a fire hose using a little paper cup. It's what does come out in our speech is such a small fraction. And I don't know if I was going for stream of consciousness because it's not what you would see other poets doing with stream of consciousness, but a little more free form, I guess, a little wilder. I have several questions for both of you. I've written them down. And I don't know how to raise my hand on this thing.
Well, you could raise it, but then you'd never be able to take it down.
I know. I'll just do this. I'll just do this. The old school way. Um, well, Erin, I think it's really interesting and you do it so creatively and beautifully, to take on a focus like employment or labor, which is almost by definition just quotidian, quotidian. It's just humdrum. It's like literally the average day in the life of somebody, and you make it interesting, and you've curated poems from people that have made it interesting. And I just really, really enjoyed that project. It's really, really, really
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, I mean, I really didn't expect to get more than 3,000 submissions for the project. And so like people would say, "So what'd you do last summer?" I'm like, "That's it. That's how I spent my summer vacation." I was reading all those poems. And the journal, because it was a special issue, they had asked if I wanted them to screen them, like pre-screen them, and then send me the sort of like finalists. And I was like, no, I want to read all of them because I don't necessarily think others would know my particular aesthetic. Like I did have a special interest in a lot of the surreal poems and a lot of the some of the funny poems. I like humor a lot in poetry, prose poems, that sort of thing. But then also these just little tiny ones like the Sri Lankan pedicab driver. I didn't want any of those to get lost, so I read every single poem. But really, this anthology could have been definitely twice as long, really probably four times as long. It's just I really wanted to have different jobs and professions represented and didn't want a whole lot of duplication. But sometimes it got really hard. I mean, like, picking out the best like waitress poem, like when there are like 100 of them that are amazing, was really challenging, but also really fun, really rewarding, and in the current climate felt like a little bit of resistance, like recognizing people who don't get recognized.
Yeah, that's good. There's so many good lines from those poems. None of this is a metaphor is a great line after that.
I know,
That
right?
was the childbirth poem.
Yep.
Yeah,
Called Labor, which of course
yeah,
was just so great with poems about work and labor to have literal labor in there.
yeah.
I
Yes,
mean, I
yes.
was wondering almost what brought you to labor as an interest, as a poet? I mean, for me, I was also just thinking a lot about like, well, poets work.
Right.
Um,
And I
and I
do
would
have I
start
do have
just,
some poets represented as well, writers
yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
represented. And also I wanted to have some of the more recent technology, like there's a work from home poem about somebody whose dog like keeps like bothering him when he's like having like Zoom meetings like this.
Yeah.
There's unemployment, people looking
Mhm.
for jobs or losing their jobs and find like like just inhumane ways they find out like that they've lost their jobs, that kind of
Mm,
thing. The way I think it came to me is I think I've always been interested. I love talking to people and hearing about their work.
Mm.
Um, like I just remember like my car being in the shop and talking to the mechanic's dad who was there about, how he got into doing body work and cars. And this just always fascinated me. And I think I would do it kind of sporadically in previous poetry collections, like, maybe have a persona poem from, somebody's point of view from a different job, like a nurse. I have a poem, and I think it's in my first collection from the point of view of a neonatal intensive care nurse. So I think I've always been interested, but it was the first time that I really started thinking about an entire collection about it. And it took a lot of research for the research-based poems for me, they can take a long time
Mhm.
and sometimes you put so much time into them and then don't end up with a poem out of it. So it's just kind of like a lot of wasted reading and taking notes and libraries and stuff. And so, I would work on that and also be working on other things at the same time. And so it kind of took years to finally come together as a collection. And then as that was coming out, that's when I had the idea for this anthology. And honestly, I really didn't need anything else on my plate at that time, but I got so excited about it that I just kind of couldn't let it go.
Mm.
And I'm also super excited that it's going to be free and accessible to everybody. So, K through 12 teachers can use it, college, faculty can use it, and people are using it not just in writing classes and English classes, but sociology and social science, human development, social work types of classes as well. So that's very rewarding.
Oh.
So yeah, that's how it came about. It's just I tend to just follow my passion. Do you do the same thing, Claire, with your work? Do you kind of follow like what it is that like how did you get into this
Yeah.
project? What drew you into it?
I mean, I've been looking at Annie Albers for a while, and then through CUNY, they have this Lost and Found project where get some kind of money to go to an archive. And so I just spent a week in January at the Annie Albers Archive in Connecticut. So, which is beautiful. The building was like designed by one of Joseph's students. It's a lovely place to be. And so I was up there, and I think, I was kind of following what was interesting within the archive itself. A lot of I mean, what's tricky with Annie Albers and why I kind of don't, I think a lot of the time when people talk about her, it's like, well, she was like the great like textile artist of the 20th century, and there's a lot of like more of like a historical read, but I find her actually really hard to access. Like she threw away a lot of her letters. She did not keep studio journals. She does not, we get like glimmers here and there of what she's thinking about. And so the fact that she's thinking about Whitehead at all, and like mentions it, she's like, maybe he's one of the only people that she keeps referring back to in her letters and has like she has a signed book and there's like little ephemera that you can kind of like piece together. But I was reading Whitehead before, so then I was interested in like what those links might be, and yeah, I think from that I kind of like built a little bit of a web of connection. But she's
It's
not,
really
yeah,
fascinating. It's fascinating what you do
yeah,
with it. The letters, that palimpsest of the
yeah,
letters was so interesting to look at. I'm glad that you were
yeah.
able to share that with us. What are you thinking, envisioning for this project? Where's it going to go from here?
I think that I mean I'm in the really cute part of my PhD where I'm figuring out my dissertation. And I think it'll probably be a chapter of that. But I think in the meantime I'm trying to see sort of where to place it. But right now it's I'm trying to go back to the archive to with having sort of read this, what I've read and then written this paper, I'm going back to look at her textiles again. So her textiles are all in Switzerland right now for a show.
So it sounds
And
like you need some funding to go to Switzerland now.
yeah, I mean, I wish. But they're coming back next fall, so I'm gonna try to go see them in person with the curators and some very special glasses so I can see them up close. But
Oh, like what kind of special glasses?
like magnifying glasses. So you
Okay.
can
But
like
you actually
see,
wear them like on both eyes?
yeah, like you can see the, the way in which the thread works. I think I was also really interested in the way that um I do textiles myself, and so then, the surface of a weaving is always going to hold like all of these things you don't see.
Hmm.
And I think that that's kind of a really nice visual, not even a metaphor. I think it's like actually doing work in some way, in order to think about, right, like this simultaneity of thought or of language as some kind of surface under which like all of this exists.
Yeah. Do you use the glasses when you're creating the textile art yourself?
No. No,
Do
because I
you
know
use the
that
glasses
because
to look
the
at your
glasses
work?
are to figure out like what happens where,
Okay.
and I kind of know what's happening when I'm making.
Right. So you would not need to use the glasses even when you're done with your own work to look at it, but other
No,
people
yeah,
might.
yeah, yeah,
Other
exactly.
people
If you're
might
trying to
use the
figure
glasses.
out what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of this fun secret that Annie kept.
Well, you taught me something I didn't know. I didn't know there were these special glasses. Now I
Yeah,
want to try
yeah.
them.
They're like, it's the fun bridge, I think. I mean, I'm in comparative literature, and so I think I bridge often into visual art and sort of like language art. So
Yeah, very
you kind of
cool.
get to use these different materials. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
I agree with Erin. Claire, your paper was beautiful and really interesting, and I didn't realize that so much could be written about textiles in such a beautiful way.
Hmm.
You're doing a really good job with this.
Mhm.
Thank you.
It seems that you must have a music background, the way that you write about textiles.
I used to sing, yeah, as like a kid.
Okay.
And so I think I also talk a lot about this. I mean, I think about it a lot, but I think my dissertation advisor and I both would like to be able to speak as if we could do a chord, like if, you could sing, you could do like three sentences at the same time. And,
Mm.
that way you can kind of like capture a little bit more of how thought is actually happening in your
And
brain.
look at that, Jared. You figured that out
Yeah,
from listening
I
to
mean, that's
her.
what I was thinking about too with the lack, it's like
That's
these things
amazing.
are happening kind of at the same time, a little bit out of time. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Robin used to sing in an Italian restaurant.
There you go.
I saw that in the
She
chat.
put that in the chat.
Did my secret double life as a music major. I was a vocal performance major back in the day.
Oh.
Do you
I
I
think,
love
used to
Robin, do
set I
you
used
think
to
about
set wheat fields
singing?
on fire.
Yeah. Do you think about singing when and music when you write, Robin, the way Claire does?
I don't think you can disconnect the two. I mean, think about the influences that we've all grown up with, right?
Mhm.
And even if you're not in music, I don't know anybody who hasn't listened to music, you know?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think that the way that subconsciously these things appear for us, and the way that I remember rhythms from past pieces that I've performed with choirs or solos that I've done. Those rhythms come back. They come out. They show up in repeated lines.
Mhm. Mhm.
And what I love about what you just said, Claire, that idea, that concept of like speaking a chord, could we have it all happen at the same time? I mean, that linked right back to what Jared, his point about we have 1,000 thoughts per minute, and I often think of them as stacked on top of one another. How can we represent that? And I think that's such a challenge
Mhm.
for writers, for creators of all types. How do we represent kind of the life of the mind or the experiences
Mhm.
in such a static, I mean writing, the written page, right, the published page in particular is static. um, I don't know, those projects, if you've probably seen projects, writing projects that also though are happening in a virtual space, and the different things that we can do with that, which makes me think maybe we could get closer to it with that. But even so, I feel like it's not quite that speaking in a chord that you do. And Erin, I really enjoyed watching you hone in on the work that Claire does and start asking those technical questions and getting curious about that. Because I'm like, that perfectly illustrates to me what your projects and those poetry of labor and work
Mhm.
and where that comes from. It's just interesting, like you can just see it. You're just interested in what other people are doing and the natures of their jobs, but also the language of those jobs too. I mean,
Yeah, I think
words that we all get to find out about when we're
that's very
researching in the
perceptive.
archives, or when we're tracking back through memory and going. I mean, I learned what those giant sprinklers are called. I've
Yeah.
always just
Yeah,
called them giant sprinklers, but now
a
I know.
pivot, right? Pivot, was that right, Jared?
Yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
had no idea. I didn't know that either. So yeah, that's something else I learned today.
So,
Yeah, such a good word for that poem too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know,
Thank
I
you.
kept thinking, Jared, with your poems that they made me think about video games and that the types of
Wow.
video game, I know that's not what you expected me to say, right? But how video games, like the ones especially that do like where there's world building,
Mm,
that your poems are like world building, right? Because
Mm.
we keep having repetitions of different characters' names. I love that you don't call your grandma grandma, right? It's Martha. Was it Martha?
Yes.
And then the neighbors, who were they? Like the Devereaux or
The
whatever.
de
I just
Beaumonts.
De
Yeah.
Beaumonts, the De Beaumonts. I love that they're like just mentioned, and so but you like repeat them, and Tink, Tinkerbell becomes Tink and mentioned in different poems. And it felt like a whole little version of world building.
mm.
Mm.
Um, and that, younger people, the way they might connect would be through video games, but you're doing it old school. I like it.
You can tell I'm old school in so many ways. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I've
it wasn't
never
the
thought
screen
about that.
sharing was not at all what gave that away. That was not.
Claire, I had another question for you, Claire.
Hmm.
Um, I used to love writing ekphrastic poetry, like just poetry about a piece of art. And I guess you're doing that about um, like textile
Hmm.
pieces. Um, what you called it something different. Would you say that what you're doing is ekphrastic, or is it slightly different?
Um, I mean, I think it definitely has elements of it. I think like I wanted to think about, I think like the quality of the ekphrastic and or like I think that that comes through in the sense that I wanted the object itself to be what I focus on or as like an active participant. And I think that sometimes that's where I definitely feel like the ekphrastic nature of it exists. It's like this, because I think about, ekphrastic poetry or things as like encounters and sort of translations and interpretations that create like a relationship between someone in the work. And I mean, Annie Alber's work, it does ask me to write a paper differently. Like it didn't feel um like it didn't feel right to use very rational thinking. And that's I think why I went to like Whitehead or to James. And I think that those sort of more modes of the intuitive or of sensation, I think definitely is like it's offering maybe a different lens through which to see a piece of art like theorizing itself or like doing some kind of work for itself. But yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that in the paper. I don't think when I sat down to write this, I had to think about how I wanted to write it for a lot longer than I think maybe other papers I've written in the past because I think the quality of the material itself was like imposing something on me, and I kind of needed to give space for that. Um, yeah, I think in the sense that I think my argument feels like it's not using the textile as like illustrative of something, but rather like letting it do its own thing. Um, And so I think like that's where the acrostic aspect of it comes in. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Well, everyone, it's just about time. We're at that 12:15 mark. I have thoroughly enjoyed this panel. Thank you so much. And I am delighted at the connections you guys all drew within your work. And I just want to say again, thank you so much. And I am sure that our friends joining us from elsewhere are clapping. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful rest of our conference.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so
Robin, you've
much.
been lovely.
Yeah,
Thank
Good
thank
you.
you.
job.
And
Good
thanks for
job
bearing with
keeping us
me.
on time.
I, as someone who has a hard time staying on time, I was
Yeah.
like, I can do this one job. So there we go. We did it, y'all.
Thank you. Have a
Thank you
great
again
day.
so much.
Thank
Have a great rest
you.
of your
Bye,
day.
everybody.
Thank
Excited to see
you.
where this work takes you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good luck.
Bye.